Well, friends, this Wednesday is Ash Wednesday. It's the beginning of like a 96-day stretch that is the holiest and most sacred time and the greatest opportunity for us in the liturgical year. Beginning on Ash Wednesday, continuing through the season of Lent, coming to the Paschal Triduum during Holy Week, which is, I think, April 3rd, 4th, 5th, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday of Holy Week. That is like the prime 3 days of the liturgical year. I really want to urge everybody to make the most of the Paschal Triduum, which means to come to the Holy Thursday Mass of the Lord's Supper, come and participate in the commemoration of the Lord's Passion on Good Friday, and if possible, come to the Easter Vigil Mass on Holy Saturday. Those are the three prime, highest, most sacred events of the liturgical year, followed by Christmas. So it's the best Holy Week in the Triduum. And then after the Triduum, we begin Easter Sunday, in the season of Easter, which continues for 50 days to Pentecost Sunday. So all told, from Ash Wednesday to Pentecost Sunday is a 96-day, I call it sort of the Lent-Easter continuum. That is the best opportunity for the disciples of the Lord during the year. I just looked this morning at the Pope's message for Lent. I'm going to hand that out to people on Ash Wednesday. But his message is that Lent and Easter is a time of conversion. That means it's a time for turning closer to the Lord. And that's exactly what it is. I can say in my life, Lent always signals the best spiritual time. And I'm kind of an Easter guy now, but there's no way of getting to Easter without going through Lent. And so it's right in front of us. And these readings for today about good and evil, about the commandments of the Lord and following the way of the Lord, these readings, they really set it up right about conversion and about our freedom to choose it, beginning with the reading for the first reading from the book of Sirach, where Sirach says, if you choose, you can keep the commandments, and they will save you. The commandments will save you. You know, oftentimes we sort of don't like commandments. Think back to when you were a kid and your parents had rules in the house. Did you like the rules? I didn't like any rules. I didn't want any rules in the house. I thought what life would have been better if my parents just left me to do what I wanted, you know. But my parents had rules. But you know what was interesting was some of my friends' parents, they had different rules. Did you ever experience that? You know the old saying, parents, your worst enemies are not your kids' friends. They're your kids' friends' parents. Because they make rules that other kids get to follow, right? I remember growing up, we had a rule in my house, there was no bad language. Did you have that rule in your house? No swearing, anything like that? No, we weren't allowed, no way. I wouldn't even think of it. If I ever used a bad word, I'd have to write it out like 1,000,000 times as a penance my mom gave me, you know. Write out 10,000 times, I'll never say this word again. But one of my friends, at one of my friends' houses, like they would swear in their house. Like mom and dad and the kids. And it was like, we'd be around them and be like, what? That's talking like, go to their house and be like, no way. I was like scared, you know, like a little bit by it, a little afraid. And I remember one of the boys in that family, he had a little brother at one point, he was like 5. And he taught his 5-year-old brother like all the bad words. And we'd get together, our families, friends, grandparents. This little 5-year-old kid be walking around to the old people saying all these words. And I was like, what? You know? Yeah, it was like, let me ask you a question. Did my mom and dad give me those rules because they loved me? Did they say, Mark, you're not going to talk like that because they loved me? Or did they just want to make my life difficult? Or when I was like 17 and I set up to go to my senior prom with my girlfriend, and all my buddies were renting a cabin out in the woods and they were going to stay there all night, and all their parents were like, yeah, go ahead, do whatever you guys want. And I said, hey, Mom, me and the guys are taking our dates. We'll be back the next day. She goes, oh, no, you won't. I was like, Mom, what's your problem? Why are you always like this? Why are you trying to make my life difficult, Mom? I'm a man. I'm 17. She's like, you're not doing that. Was my mom like that because she loved me? Of course. She loved me so much. She made my life a little challenging. The commands of the Lord can be like that, except the difference is mom and dad aren't perfect, God is. The Old Testament tells us his commands are true, his commands are clear, his commands are just, his commands are right. The commands of the Lord endure forever. And they're meant to save us. But we are free. We have to choose. Like Sirach says, he has set before you fire and water. What do you want to jump into? The fire or the water? We all have that choice. And you know what? We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to sometimes violate the commands of the Lord, just probably like sometimes we also broke the rules of our parents, you know. And it's important for me to say this. The church is not a hotel for saints, right? It's a hospital for sinners. So we're not looking for perfection. All of us at times in our life violate the commands of the Lord, but the commands of the Lord are wonderful. They make our life beautiful. They help us to be truly free. Not with the freedom of, I can do whatever I want. No, that's actually not real freedom. Real freedom is I live in the truth and the light. The freedom that is like, yeah, I'm going to do whatever I want, even when it's really bad and harmful, chains us down, it shackles us. St. Paul says we can become enslaved to sin. And we're not made for that. So it's important. So I want to say some things about the commands of the Lord. You know, I had the chance this week to go to Baltimore to visit Deacon CJ. You guys all remember Deacon CJ? Real nice guy, military guy, short hair, about to be a priest. Everybody likes him. He's like the best guy around when he's around. Yeah. Deacon CJ. So I visited our seminarians there, and Deacon CJ was telling me that he has a class preparing them to celebrate the sacraments. And for one of the sacraments, the sacrament of reconciliation, he interviewed like 6 people about their experiences of the sacrament of reconciliation, including a mother and a daughter. The daughter goes to one of the Catholic high schools in Buffalo. And he had a bunch of questions for them about confession. And the girl, she's like a junior at one of the Catholic high schools in Buffalo. She said in her responses to Deacon CJ, she said that they only offer like confession like once, maybe twice a year at the high school for like an hour and a half. And there's like 3 priests and 100 girls, 120 girls to go to confession. She's like, it's so fast, you know. She goes, but honestly, Deacon, most of the girls don't know anything about sin. She goes, in fact, I don't even know anything about sin. You could talk about it, but none of us really understand what it is at our Catholic high school. And she was like, and I wish they would talk more about it. Isn't that interesting? I wish they would talk more about it. Because freedom from sin is a beautiful life. And sin itself always leads to brokenness. And as American Catholics, I think we've lost some of the sense of this. We've discarded some of the elements of the Lord's commandments, or we've forgotten them. And I kind of want to review some of the most basic and important ones. But let me just preface it by saying us priests have a huge responsibility for this. So I'll take it on our shoulders as you hear these things. I'll take it on our shoulders, because one of the things that happens with the priesthood in the last few decades is we've gotten away ourselves from the ways of the Lord as a presbyterate, priest, and kind of stopped teaching the commands of the Lord with clarity. Maybe at times past they were taught with too much intensity, and that caused sort of a reaction. And I'd say that priests, maybe we thought better, a little bit like the scribes and the Pharisees. The scribes and the Pharisees, Jesus calls them out many times in the Gospels. The scribes and the Pharisees go wrong because they know what God's plan is, and then they come up with their own plan and say, this is a better way. And the better way tends to kind of suit them. You know, does that make sense? The better way fits with their thinking. And sometimes when we do that with the things the Lord gives us and say, well, the Lord has a plan for this, but we got a better way, not going to work. And I think we priests kind of did that in recent decades, where it's like, well, the Lord loves everybody, and we want to be gentle, so let's not tell them about sin. Let's not talk about brokenness. Let's forget the commands of the Lord. Let's put them aside. You know what? That plan failed. It's failed. And I think that us priests have that responsibility. Jesus said in the gospel today, really, really profoundly, he said, whoever breaks one of these least commandments and teaches others to do so will be the least. But whoever teaches others to do them will be the greatest. So we have that responsibility to teach. And sometimes we maybe thought, us priests, we know a better way. But that project and idea has been a massive failure. So let me just, for us, especially in this country who've lost some of those key elements, I just want to review some of the most basic teachings of the church, commands of the Lord that might be challenging. Number one I want to mention is the obligation to go to Mass every Sunday. This is a sine qua non for the week. The number one thing, when we make our plan for the week, number one should be, I'm going to Mass. I like to joke with people, if you get that one, take the rest of the week off. None of it really matters that much. In a way, it's true. I know there's other important stuff to do, but you go to Mass every week, cha-ching, yep, you're rolling. And the habit of going to Mass every week, well, that puts us on a pathway that's firm and strong. So I know, I'm preaching to the choir here, you're all at Mass, it's Sunday, but I just want to emphasize that commandment of the Lord to go to Mass every week, unless you're sick, throwing up, or work legitimately makes it impossible. The obligation to go to Mass it's bedrock. It's foundational. And not going to Mass is a grave matter, serious matter, what we call a mortal sin. But we don't want to go there. So we just want to be rock solid in that. Lord, if I got anything, I'm going to Mass every Sunday. I got that going for me, I'll take it. That's the most basic thing. Now, I think the real genesis of the modern problem, in a way, when it comes to a lot of the moral teachings of the church and what's sort of unfolded in our society, is connected to the teaching of St. Paul VI, who was Pope in the 1960s and 70s. And in 1968, he produced a document to the church called Humanae Vitae, which restated, and a lot of you might not be aware of this, it restated the church's teaching that husband and wife in their marriage are called to be open to the gift of children, which isn't shocking. I mean, the last thing before a couple says their vows on the altar, they're asked this question: will you accept children from God in a loving and responsible way and raise them according to the law of Christ and his church? And they say, yeah. It's a constitutive part of marriage, right? People get married because they love each other and they want to have a family. So being open to the gift of children is constitutive of marriage. It's a necessary part of marriage. But what does it mean to be open to the gift of children? Well, for all Christians, throughout all of Christian history, they all believed that the union of husband and wife was sacred and that it wasn't to be tinkered with the use of things that would artificially prevent children from being conceived. This doesn't mean that people have to have 10 kids or 12 kids. Couples can be responsible and make decisions to space their children, but they can't use artificial means, what we call artificial contraception or artificial birth control, to do so. They should only use natural means. And that is something that every Christian believed until 1925, when the Anglican Church at the Lambeth Conference said, we're going to discard that. And so they changed that. And then, one by one, many of the Protestant communities started to cave into that. In the 1960s, the question came before Pope Paul VI, and Pope Paul VI said, I am not free to downgrade the sacrament of marriage and the sacredness of the love of husband and wife. The teaching of the church is not something I'm free to change. It's biblical, it's the truth. Marriage in the union of spouses is sacred. And so being open to the gift of children is a constitutive part. But that teaching was met with, in this part of the world, widespread rejection, mainly by priests and theologians. In fact, a large group of theologians, the week after the Pope gave this teaching in the summer of 1968, took out a full-page ad in the Washington Post and the New York Times, I think those two papers, and said, we reject this teaching. Priests and theologians. A few of them were professors at our seminary. And our bishop at the time, Bishop McNulty, he canned those priests that day. You're not teaching in my seminary. And those priests got kind of cheered on by the other priests. But you know what the young priests of today are like? We're inspired by that bishop and his courage. It's sort of funny how sometimes the shoe ends up on the other foot. But that teaching is an important one because we believe that the love of family life is sacred. And you know what, deep down, all of us want it to be that way. We want it to be the most special and wonderful thing it really is. Again, for this reason, same goes with regard to intimacy outside of marriage. The serious physical intimacy of people is reserved for the bond of husband and wife. And outside of marriage is not morally healthy or to our benefit or welfare. So the union of marriage is on a pedestal for Catholics. Same thing with the dignity of the human person. And this is one that today, I'm telling you, a lot of people in our society, including Catholics, are wrestling with. We'd all say, yeah, we believe in the dignity of the human person. But when you break it down into the different categories, that's where sometimes we'll get a little uncertain. And it's important for us to be clear about it. You know, the great Cardinal Joseph Bernardin from Chicago, he talked about the church's teaching on human dignity being like a seamless garment. So it applies to everybody. Unborn children, foreigners, immigrants, regardless of their status, people of other races, languages, ethnic backgrounds, religions. The human dignity of each person is inviolable. We as Catholics stand by the dignity of every person. Human rights begin at conception, and they extend to every moment of human life. And we Catholics 100% hold that without any exceptions. The dignity of every human person is sacred. Every person, no matter what, is a treasure made in the image and likeness of God. And another thing, I sort of alluded to this when I was talking about Deacon CJ interviewing that girl that we've lost, is the practice of the sacrament of going to confession, of reconciliation, of bringing our sins to the priest and confessing them. Every Catholic should make some regular use of the sacrament of confession. I would say at the minimum once a year. You know, when Deacon CJ talked to that girl in high school, she said that they only offer confessions a little bit, you know, for all those girls. And Deacon CJ followed up and he said, well, what would you prefer? Would you prefer they had like 6 priests here for like 3 or 4 hours once a semester? Or would you prefer that there was a priest here every week for like an hour, just one priest for an hour a week? She goes, that would be the best. She goes, in fact, I would even probably be able to get some of my girlfriends to go to confession too. And her mom, interestingly, said, I was going to go to confession a couple times in the last 30 years, but both times a priest told me not to worry about it. Wrong, Padre, right? No, sacrament of confession. You like brushing your teeth? Or you like just walking around having not brushed your teeth all day? You like washing your hair? Me too. I love it. I love brushing my teeth and washing my hair. It feels good. Going to confession, cleaning your soul, feels a million times better. It's so good. Sacrament of reconciliation, which brings me back to going to Mass every Sunday. That if I'm conscious of a serious sin, again, basic biblical teaching from Letters of St. Paul. If I'm conscious of a serious sin, I should go to confession before I receive communion again. Basic constitutive teaching of the church. If I'm aware of a serious sin, I want to confess it before I go to communion again and receive the grace of the Lord in all of its fullness. Like Jesus says, if you bring your gift to the altar and there recall that your brother has anything against you, leave your gift there at the altar. Go first and be reconciled with your brother, and then come and offer your gift. In a way, that's an invitation. Go first and be reconciled. Namely, be at peace. And that's actually the gift of following the commands of the Lord. The commands of the Lord give us the peace and the freedom that we long for, that accords with the dignity that belongs to each one of us as a treasure of the heart of God. You are a treasure of the heart of God. That's why the Lord gives us his commandments. Just like mom and dad love us and guide us to walk in the right ways, all the more so, God loves us perfectly and guides us in his ways. May we walk in them. Amen.